Manishti is also known for its bitter politics. I have seen much water flow under the Howrah Bridge, covering Bengal in all its vivid colors.
I now request the Honorable Prime Minister to launch NDTV World and address the summit.
It was the grand launch of NDTV World by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. NDTV World, as he laid out his vision for the India century at the NDTV World Summit.
कैसी सदी जिसमें भारत के प्रयासों से दुनिया में स्थिरता आए,
in the presence of those who are shaping our future.
मेरी तरफ से आपको ढेर सारी शुभकामनाएं हैं।
NDTV World, your new home for global news is here.
NDTV proudly presents NDTV World Summit 2024, the India Century. I now request the Honorable Prime Minister to launch NDTV World and address the summit.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's inaugural session at the NDTV Summit outlined his vision for the India century, driven by aspirational India.
हमारा प्रयास होगा भारत की सेंचुरी
Hello and welcome. You're watching NDTV. I'm Aditi Bhardwaj, and let's take a look at what's happening around the world with the top news that we're tracking here at this hour. Sri Lanka set to vote in a second national election. Sri Lankan president eyes parliamentary win to reshape the debt-ridden island country. Three former Iraqi prisoners who were tortured by US military have won a $42 million judgment against an American defense contractor. US President Joe Biden and President-elect Donald Trump meet at the Oval Office to begin a transfer of power after Trump won the historic 2024 elections. British daily newspaper The Guardian has said it would no longer be posting content on the social media platform X, saying it has become too toxic. US President Joe Biden is set to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in Peru. Now, Sri Lanka is set to vote in a second national election in as many months, with a deeply divided opposition struggling to recover from a crushing defeat at presidential polls. The snap parliamentary election was called by the new president, Anura Kumara Dissanayake, the South Asian island's first leftist leader, after he won polls on a promise to combat graft and recover the country's stolen assets. Now, Dissanayake party is widely tipped to sweep Thursday's parliamentary vote, with analysts saying the opposition is in disarray. Now, the president, an outsider of the family parties that have dominated Sri Lankan politics for decades, swept to power, promising change as the country emerges from a crushing financial crisis. Millions of voters put faith in his graft-fighting pledge and vows to bolster a fragile economic recovery. To speak more on the issue and to understand the Sri Lankan political dynamics, I am being joined by Rohan Samarjiva, who is the Sri Lankan policy analyst and the chairman of a think tank. Thank you so much, Rohan, for speaking to us this morning. You know, President wants a fresh mandate in the legislature to drive economic reforms in the debt-ridden island nation. How do you read into that?
Well, he had only 3 members in the previous parliament, which had 225 members. This is the Sri Lankan system. Parliamentary elections are separate from the election for the president, who has considerable powers. It's conducted on a proportional basis. So if the president gets the same percentage of votes that he got 2 months ago, he will have a minority government. But it's likely that because turnout will be quite low, the percentage could go up and he could get a working majority.
Right. Opposition leader, and the party is expected to be NPP's main challenger alongside the New Democratic Front, a breakaway group from the party of the Rajapaksa family and backed by former President Ranil Wickremesinghe. How do you see the opposition fighting against this?
Well, the old Sri Lanka's oldest political formation, which was the one that got power immediately after independence, is the United National Party, or the UNP. It has now fractured into two parts, and it's likely that one of the parts will be the main majority. It's likely that it will be the previous leader of opposition's party rather than the entity that is associated with the former president, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, who is, by the way, not contesting in any form in this election, though he has gone on the hustings to support the people who worked with him in the economic recovery. And there are a whole number of new parties that are trying to occupy the chaotic political space.
Sri Lanka, Sri Lankans were hit hard by the 2022 economic crisis, triggered by a severe shortfall of foreign currency that added to problems caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. What steps does Sri Lanka need to take to avoid that situation in the future?
That's relatively easy. We have to stay with the promises and the commitments that we made as part of the IMF program. And interestingly, President Dissanayake, who talked a different kind of language during his campaign, is staying more or less fully with the IMF program, and in fact has gone ahead and signed a budget support agreement for US dollars 200 million with the World Bank that commits to the continuation of the reforms initiated by President Rajapaksa. So while he comes from the left and while he was quite critical of the IMF program, it is quite likely that he will stay with the IMF program. Now, there will be a real tension because he knows that in order to keep the economy solvent, he's got to keep with the tax changes and so on that were introduced and some of the economic reforms. But quite a lot of the people who will be coming into parliament from his party may not agree with those, because this was a tough time with a lot of austerity measures. And I think there's a lot of demand from the middle classes, particularly, to end some of the austerity measures. So I think we could expect some internal tensions in the government that will be now formed.
Right. Rohan, but investors worry that Dissanayaka's desire to revisit the terms of the country's IMF bailout could delay future disbursement and make it more harder for Sri Lanka to hit a crucial primary surplus target of 2.3% of GDP in 2025.
Indeed. The IMF third review was supposed to take place in October. It has now been postponed to February of next year. There is an IMF team in town. Actually, I'll be meeting them on Friday. So the IMF process is going on, though it's delayed. So there is some concern that without the 300 million that will come from the next tranche, it may be difficult to work out the budget and keep to the targets, because these various targets, every 6 months, there have to be targets that have to be met. So it's going to be challenging. It's going to be a challenging few months ahead of us.
Absolutely. Rohan, thank you so much for joining us this morning and giving an overview of what to expect from Sri Lankan snap elections. Now, Pakistan's jailed former Premier Imran Khan has issued a final call for a protest in Islamabad on November 24 to press for his release from jail. His sister Alima Khan, after meeting him in jail, told the media that everyone from the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, including workers, members of parliament and party supporters, should join this protest. The so-called final call for protest comes after a series of protests by the PTI supporters since September. For more on this, I am being joined by my colleague Mohammad Ghazali. Ghazali, the last protest call towards Islamabad on October 4 failed to achieve its objective.
And yeah, that is why Imran Khan is yet again trying to revive that culture of protest, or asking people to mobilize people to come on the streets and ensure his release. And that is why his sister, who met him yesterday, said that Imran Khan's appeal is to four categories of people: lawyers, doctors, students, and other people from society to come on the streets, press the government for his release. But it doesn't directly address the workers to press for his release, but he says that the protest is against the 26th Amendment of the Constitution, where the powers of the Supreme Court will be taken away. Now, the larger picture is that time and again, people have written him off in politics in Pakistan, but he is trying himself so that he should be released, or that will revive his career. Despite winning the elections, he alleges that his party was not allowed to have the mandate of the people or be in power, and he alleges that the election was rigged, and on fake cases he was put behind the bars. Now we'll have to see whether on 24th his call for protest does yield some result or not, because the last time the government of Pakistan didn't give them adequate permission for these people to gather and protest, and it also turned violent, and many of his leaders were later arrested as well.
Ghazali, amid these desperate call for protest, we'll see and wait and watch how this, the future politics of and the political career of Imran Khan takes off from here. Thank you so much, Ghazali, for joining us with those details. Now, 3 former Iraq prisoners who were tortured by US military have won a $42 million judgment against an American defense contractor in connection with electrocutions, beatings and other abuses the men say they suffered at the infamous prison operated by the US military after the invasion of Iraq in 2003. American prison handlers came under fire for abuses at the prison outside Baghdad after the US took it over from the regime of Saddam Hussein. The photographs and reports of abuse led to several military investigations into such prisons that documented widespread mistreatment of detainees. Take a look at this report.
Yeah, it's been 2 decades since the photos came out that sort of shocked the world at Abu Ghraib. They were sort of horrified prisoners, stacked in naked pyramids, subjected to electric shocks, all those sort of things, with U.S. soldiers smiling in the background. And so it was an earth-shaking story 20 years ago. And what we've had here now in Alexandria, Virginia, a jury has awarded $42 million to 3 of those detainees it's a verdict against a U.S.-based military contractor, CACI. CACI provided the interrogators. They provided civilian interrogators to supplement the military effort at Abu Ghraib. And the jury found that those interrogators were complicit and conspired with the military police to soften up detainees for questioning with abusive treatment. These 3 plaintiffs in this suit, they weren't depicted in any of those photos, but what they described happening to them was very similar. They said they were beaten. One said he was sexually assaulted. They said that they were forced to be naked for extended periods of time. They were threatened with dogs. That was what they described in their testimony at trial. Now, CACI, there was never an allegation that the CACI interrogators were the ones who explicitly inflicted this abuse on the detainees. but the theory was legally, it was sort of a conspiracy. And this was the first time that a U.S. jury heard these cases in a civil lawsuit. And it had been kicked around in appeals courts for 15 years. And CACI had thrown up a bunch of different defenses, some sort of factual defenses and some sort of legal defenses. They said that it involved state secrets. They said that they were entitled to immunity. And they had had some success on these things. There were different times that this case was, in fact, tossed out of court. But it was revived on appeal, so it was up and down, back and forth between the appeals courts for 15 years. Certainly the plaintiffs and the plaintiffs' lawyers, a nonprofit group called the Center for Constitutional Rights, they filed this lawsuit on the plaintiffs' behalf. They, of course, celebrated the verdict and said that it does send a message to contractors that they need to be responsible for their actions in war zones.
Now, US President Joe Biden and President-elect Donald Trump met at the Oval Office to begin transfer of power after Trump won the 2024 elections in a historic comeback. On meeting, Biden told Trump that he looked forward to a smooth transition in January, assuring his predecessor he would make sure he was properly accommodated when he retakes the White House. Future First Lady Melania Trump was not part of this customary meet, a point that was majorly noted by some. Now listen into what the Biden and Trump meet looked like, while my colleague Jessica Stone reports more.
Well, Mr. President-elect and former President and Donald, congratulations. Thank you. And looking forward to having like we said, a smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need. And we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So
good.
Welcome
Thank you
back.
very much. And thank you very much. And politics is tough, and it's in many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate it very much. And a transition that's so smooth, it'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Jim.
You're welcome.
President Joe Biden welcomed incoming President Donald Trump back to the Oval Office, shaking his hand in front of a roaring fire, the two exchanging comments about a peaceful transition of power, Joe Biden offering his administration's help in that effort, saying he'll do whatever he can to make for a smooth transition. Trump responding that politics is a tough game and said that he appreciated the efforts that Biden is making. Now, Melania, Trump's wife, was noticeably absent from this exchange. She did not come to the White House with Trump, Trump coming alone and being greeted by Dr. Jill Biden and President Joe Biden. Dr. Jill Biden did give him a letter, handwritten, to Melania, congratulating her on her win and welcoming her to the White House. Meantime, Trump continues to nominate more loyalists to his cabinet. Those include Pete Hegseth to the defense secretary position. He's a former Fox News host. We also know that Kristi Noem has been nominated, a South Dakota governor who campaigned with the president, and she has been nominated to the position of Homeland Security Chief. And Congressman Mike Waltz, a former Green Beret and a Republican congressman, has been named to the position of National Security Advisor. VOA asked him about ending the Ukraine war just a few minutes ago here on Capitol Hill, and he responded, quote, "The president has been very clear in terms of getting both sides to the table and ending the war."
Now, in the series of decisions that the Trump administration is taking in appointing new people, Trump taps Matt Gaetz for Attorney General position. Now, Gaetz' nomination is one of the most significant to date. As Attorney General, he would be the country's chief law enforcement officer and oversee the legal positions that the government takes on key issues, including abortion, civil rights laws, and First Amendment issues. Meanwhile, former Democrat Tulsi Gabbard, who has opposed U.S. support for Ukraine, met Syria's President Bashar al-Assad as the incoming Director of National Intelligence. US President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping will meet on Saturday at the APEC summit in Peru, in what will likely be their last encounter before Donald Trump returns to the White House. The meeting will be the third between the leaders of the world's two biggest economies and their second since a major ice-breaking set of talks in California a year ago.
While in Lima, President Biden will also meet with President Xi Jinping of the People's Republic of China. This will be the third in-person meeting between the two leaders since President Biden came into office, and their final meeting as presidents.
And now Israeli forces launched fresh strikes across the southern and central Lebanon, including against targets in a southern suburb in Beirut. Here, the Israel Defense Forces said it hit facilities used by Hezbollah for military purposes in the capital suburb, while issuing new evacuation warnings for Lebanese civilians living in specific areas of southern Beirut. Hezbollah said it has also carried out its first air attack on Israel's Kiryat military base. As many as 63 people have been killed across Gaza as Israeli airstrikes bombs residential buildings, and Israeli strikes kill at least 28 in Lebanon. Now, United States says it wants real and extended pauses in fighting in Gaza, as it feels Israel has achieved its goal, and so the war should end now. Russia ramped up its deep strikes into Ukraine with a volley of missiles aimed at Kyiv and a northeastern border area, ending a more than 2-month pause in such attacks on the capital. The missile bombardment came as Russian forces sought to press their advantage in both soldiers and firepower across the eastern front. Ukraine's military reported a wave of aerial bombing targeting its troops holding a pocket of Russian territory near the northern border that was captured last summer. And now U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken assured NATO on Wednesday that the Biden administration would bolster its support for Ukraine in the few months before Donald Trump's return as president, and would try to strengthen the alliance in that time. Now, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken met a Ukrainian counterpart where he made such promises. And with that, we're slipping into a very short break, but don't go anywhere. More news and updates on the other side.
Stay informed and entertained with the new and updated NDTV News app. You can watch all our channels live, listen to podcasts, read breaking and exclusive news from around the world and more. Download the NDTV app today and get access to the best journalism and storytelling on your smartphone or tablet. The NDTV app. News that matters to you. NDTV proudly upholds its legacy of trust and credibility. According to the prestigious Reuters Institute's Digital News Report 2024, NDTV is the topmost news platform in the country. Number 1 in both online and offline reach in India. Beating all its competition, NDTV stands for trust.
Hello and welcome to India Sense, where I speak with global opinion makers.
The United States has made a strategic decision over the last 20 years to move closer to India.
So a $7 trillion economy seems a perfectly conceivable number.
If you want to be a national party, it's that you sort of accept the way the world is rather than want to endlessly hark back to how it was.
Modi is promoting the digitization of the economy, which is accelerating growth in the country.
I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president.
Donald triumphs. What does Trump's win mean for America, for the world, for the wars, and for India-US relations? Non-stop coverage on NDTV. Top analysts and voices from the ground. Extensive coverage on NDTV.
Now, British daily newspaper The Guardian has said it would no longer be posting content on the social media platform X. The newspaper posted a statement on its website explaining the decision. The Guardian said it has become increasingly concerned regarding the deeply disturbing content promoted or found on the platform, including far-right conspiracy theories and racism. Now, US inflation ticked higher in October 2024 amid higher costs for shelter after having showed in September to their lowest pace since 2021, which led Wall Street to lower its bets for the US Federal Reserve's definite interest rate cuts in 2025. The data underscored the ongoing risk Fed policymakers face trying to bring price pressures fully under control in the world's largest economy. As per reports, Special Counsel Jack Smith intends to step down before President-elect Donald Trump takes office and is discussing the mechanics of winding down the federal prosecutions against him with the Justice Department leadership. In a flurry of changeovers amid Trump administration's takeover, Republicans have elected South Dakota Senator John Thune as the next Senate Majority Leader, completing a momentous shift in their leadership that elevates a top deputy of Mitch McConnell into a key position as President-elect Donald Trump returns to the White House. Republicans are replacing McConnell, the longest-serving Senate party leader, as they prepare to take majority control of the Senate with the 53 seats they won in last week's election. Now, Paris prosecutors have requested a 2-year prison sentence for far-right leader Marine Le Pen and an additional 5-year period of ineligibility to run for office in a trial over the suspected embezzlement of European Parliament funds, where her ability to participate in the 2027 presidential race is at stake. However, she has rejected the charge, saying that prosecutors were only interested in preventing her from running for president in 2027. Now, amid escalating regional tensions, voters in the self-declared state of Somaliland voted on Wednesday in its 4th general election since its 1991 break from Somalia. While Somaliland now has its own government, parliament, currency, passports and other features of an independent country, however, its sovereignty remains unrecognized internationally as Somalia continues to view it as part of its territory. And with that, it's a wrap from my side on this news edition. More news and updates on the other side.
It's a web of frauds, calls, luring emails, threatening messages. Cyber frauds have cast their net wide and everyone is at risk. We track the victims, their horror stories as they get conned online, extorted and robbed of their hard-earned money. How to identify a cyber fraud and how to stay cyber safe. What are your options? Fraud.con, NDTV initiative for cyber safety. Only on NDTV 24x7.
We reached an agreement on patrolling. We have gone back to where the situation was in 2020, and we can say with that the disengagement process with China, you can say, has been completed. The understanding, to my knowledge, is that we will be able to do the patrolling which we were doing in 2020.
I've been reporting on all issues, big and small, from Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, rest of South India, bringing you all the action, all that you need to know, all that you want to know.
The energy of Maximum City is infectious. I bring in that energy in our news coverage from financial capital, Mumbai.
India's IT capital is always buzz. It's literally a city that never sleeps.
And I keep you ahead on all the Bengaluru buzz.
Covering from the southernmost part of India over the last 23 years, I bring in-depth and 360-degree coverage from the Dravidian heartland.
The land of Mishti is also known for its bitter politics. I have seen much water flow under the Howrah Bridge, covering Bengal in all its vivid colors.
I now request the Honorable Prime Minister to launch NDTV World and address the summit.
It was the grand launch of NDTV World by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. NDTV World, as he laid out his vision for the India century at the NDTV World Summit.
ऐसी सदी जिसमें भारत के प्रयासों से दुनिया में स्थिरता आए.
In the presence of those who are shaping our future.
मेरी तरफ से आपको ढेर सारी शुभकामनाएं हैं.
NDTV World, your new home for global news is here.
NDTV proudly presents NDTV World Summit 2024, the India Century. I now request the Honorable Prime Minister to launch NDTV World and address the summit.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's inaugural session at the NDTV Summit outlined his vision for the India century, driven by aspirational India.
हमारा प्रयास होगा भारत की सेंचुरी सिर्फ भारत की नहीं बल्कि पूरी मानवता की जीत की सेंचुरी बने.
The summit brought together prominent global leaders, highlighting India's pivotal role on the world stage.
Not just Indians trusting India's leadership, but the global South especially trusting India's leadership.
Permanent seat on the UN Security Council is something that should be India's right.
Canada is concerned, I think there are some very specific issues. I think a lot of people know that.
AI is going to be one of the most important drivers.
It's a very exciting time for India, Indian cinema as well at a global level.
NDTV World Summit was more than just a conversation. It was a confluence of ideas poised to shape our global future.
Pollution is in the severe category. Yet again, it's day 2 of very poor visibility levels as far as the national capital region is concerned. It is impacting flights, but the impact it's having on our health, we'll have you all that covered, especially the impact it has on our eyes. That and a whole lot more on the breakfast show today. Let's just first get you the headlines. It's welcome back, and that's how Joe Biden welcomed Donald Trump back to the White House. This was during that meeting at the Oval Office to begin the transfer of power after Donald Trump won the 2024 elections in that historic comeback. In the Chennai doctor stabbing case, a symbolic protest will be conducted at the hospitals. This is after the doctors have decided to call off that strike that they had gone on since yesterday in the afternoon. This is after they met with the health officials. They decided to call off that strike. There's a video now that is surfaced showing the suspect with blood-stained knife. He was trying to get rid of that knife at the hospital and trying to make his way out before being caught. And the Delhi NCR region is under a thick blanket of smog yet again. Multiple flights were impacted yesterday. The prices of air tickets have gone, off the charts. But how does it impact our health? That and a whole lot more. We will get you all the details of how you can protect your eyes. Exorbitant airfares, of course, the safety of passengers is paramount, but how unfair is it for the poor passenger to burn a hole in his pocket during these unforeseen circumstances? In an NDTV exclusive, this is the telecom body that cracks down on spam calls. And in a major crackdown, Telangana Cyber Security Bureau has arrested 48 people, including 38 mule account holders who've allowed their accounts to be knowingly misused. Let's get you our top story. You're watching NDTV 24x7. I'm Divya Vadva. Now it's Donald Trump, who was welcomed by the outgoing President Joe Biden at the Oval Office. He, in fact, went ahead and welcomed him back to the White House. It is a meeting that took place by that bonfire with both the leaders there warming up after the tension that has, been in place for years now. They have spoken about the transfer of power, and this is after Donald Trump won the 2024 elections in that historic comeback. Well, both the leaders have agreed that it's going to be a very smooth transition in the month of January. Do remember the swearing-in ceremony is only going to take place on the 20th of January 2025, assuring his predecessor that he would make sure he was properly accommodated when he retakes the White House. Of course, our future First Lady Melania Trump was not part of this customary meet, but my colleague Jessica Stone gets us details of this very crucial meeting.
Well, Mr. President-elect and former President and Donald, congratulations. And looking forward to having like we said, a smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need. And we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So
good.
Welcome.
Thank you
Back.
very much. And thank you very much. And politics is tough. And it's, in many cases, not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate it very much. And a transition that's so smooth, it'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Joe.
You're welcome.
President Joe Biden welcomed incoming President Donald Trump back to the Oval Office, shaking his hand in front of a roaring fire, the two exchanging comments about a peaceful transition of power, Joe Biden offering his administration's help in that effort, saying he'll do whatever he can to make for a smooth transition. Trump responding that politics is a tough game and said that he appreciated the efforts that Biden is making. Now, Melania, Trump's wife, was noticeably absent from this exchange. She did